Everyone, welcome. I'm incredibly excited that you've joined us today. And what is this session about? It's really about what we've heard from employers and advisors, and even some of our partners, that there's a need to help educate just the community that you're a part of on what is the real differences between fully insured and self-funding, and how do we make the transition? What's involved in that? And so we can't do all of that in one 30-minute session. So today's the first in a series of sessions to really try to help educate you, close the gap, and help you move into a different direction if it makes sense for you. And so, by the way, my name's Dave Earl. I'm the Chief Healthcare Strategist for WellNet, and again, excited to have you here. And so very quickly, just who's WellNet? We're just the sponsor of today's call. And WellNet is a specialist at administering self-funded health plans for successful companies all across the country. Enough about us. Let's jump into the content. So, very first thing I want to talk to you about is what really is insurance? Insurance is simply a risk management strategy that involves the contractual shifting of risk from one party to another. So think about that. You're basically saying, here's a risk that I have. I'm not comfortable with this risk, and I want to just shift it to someone else. So that's what insurance is about. So sometimes people even have difficulty thinking about that in simplistic terms. So let's go there. I want to keep it simple for you. And so let's start this way. All of you either have life insurance, home insurance, car insurance, and all types of other insurances in your life today. So when you see some of these logos on the screen, it probably immediately makes you think about one of those. So those types of insurances, you basically have said, you know what, I don't want to have to worry about this. I don't want to have to think about what might happen in any of these situations with my car, my home, my life. And so I want to have someone else be responsible for that risk and transfer that risk. And so what you've done is you've transferred that risk. And so what happens in this type of insurance? You pay an insurance premium every single month, don't you? And then who's responsible for paying the claims under the policy? Well, all of those carriers are. And let's think about, in a bad year, who's responsible for the losses? They are. In a good year, who benefits the most? They do. And so the problem in this scenario is that you have no visibility into what are the claims, what's happening, and then as a result of those claims and what's happening, what's going to be my premium next year? That in each of these types of policies, whether it's auto, home, life, or even health, when you've transferred the risk fully to another party, you're fully insuring that risk, and they don't have to share with you any of that claims experience. And so that's why sometimes when you get your premium renewal the next year, it's a bit of a surprise because you had no idea what's happening. So I thought it would kind of help you also think about what happens within insurance and what makes things change. And I'm going to share with you how that might exist in a homeowner's policy. So think about it simply. In a homeowner's policy, this actually happened to a friend of ours recently. Sometimes you might have a leak in your home. And the leak could be, let's say, under the ground. It's under the floor. You don't even know this leak is taking place, but water is leaking from pipes, and it's probably beginning to seep onto the ground. Or the leak could be in the ceiling. Let's say it's a heating or air conditioning unit on top of your house, and it's beginning just to leak. Again, it's a small leak. You don't know what's happening. It could happen for weeks or months before anything comes to your attention, until all of a sudden that water has now seeped for so long that now it starts showing up. It starts showing up because you see that small little drip in your ceiling, and then that small drip becomes a larger drip. And then all of a sudden you're wondering, should I do something about this? And then at the time that you're ready now to do something about this, now all of a sudden you're looking for containers all around your house to see what you can do to kind of cover and catch that water. But if you don't catch it in time, and you don't know how bad the leak was to begin with, then you see the picture in the bottom right-hand corner. That's when all of a sudden now you have flooding in your home. And what happens when all that flooding takes place? It ruins a lot of things in your home. Now you're thinking about my pipes and you're thinking about the drywall that has to be done, the flooring, there could be electrical. There's all types of things that could happen as a result of this. So what do? You immediately do a search and you start looking for, maybe it's through Amazon, maybe it's through Angie's List, but you begin to find who are the specialists out there that can now help me repair what's just happened to my home. And so you find a plumber for the leaks, and a carpenter for the wood, and an electrician for the wiring, an HVAC person for the heating and the cooling, and then a painter for your walls. So you've got to bring in all these specialists, and that's really expensive, as you know, if you've either been through this or know someone that has. So now what's going to happen? After all of that stuff takes place, your homeowner policy is now, and the owner of that homeowner policy that you transfer that risk to, back on that previous logo slide, they're now going to evaluate how much money did we just have to pay out as a result of the claims you filed with us and the leak that occurred in your home. First, they're going to kind of confirm, are we really responsible? Were you negligent in some way? And if you weren't, and now we've got to possibly pay on these claims, what can we do to minimize the payment on these claims? I actually have a person on my team that this happened to, unfortunately, that lives in New York. And when this happened to him, you know who I'm talking about, buddy. And so sorry for using your example. But in this example, then the homeowner came back and the policy came back and they said, look, this type of loss to us, based on the premium that you've paid to us, we might have to cancel your insurance. And now you're in a different situation because now you've got to think about, what do I do to get coverage for my home? So when you think about that, you might be thinking, why is Dave talking about some type of homeowner policy or leak? Well, the reason why is because it's very similar to what's really happening in healthcare. Let's look at it. So think about in healthcare, and think about maybe right now you're a person that's in the C-suite, or maybe you're an advisor who's talking to someone on the C-suite as either a prospect or client. And so this is the reality that what happens in the health plan every single day in every single health plan. And if you're fully insured and you've transferred that risk to an insurance company, you don't know what's happening. You don't know that you have a leak in your health plan that's not being addressed. So let's look at this. How does that happen in a health plan? Well, let's say that you've got a person, they just gain a little bit of weight. They continue to eat without concern. They're kind of lazy. They're not thinking about really what I need to do, but they're just living life like they normally do. Well, I can actually say sometimes I've been like that. But what happens if you don't address it? Well, for some people, if they continue not to address it, they continue not to react to those warning signs. In some cases, a person might feel hungrier, they might feel tired, and they're just thinking this is part of a result of maybe what they're eating or what they're drinking. And then maybe they're really thirsty and they have dry mouth and they have blurry vision, they have dry skin. Well, guess what? All of these are signs that the person actually might be pre-diabetic. And so if they don't address this, then what happens? That can result in things like heart disease, kidney disease, heart attacks. There's so many things that can happen. And this happens in health plans every single day. Now, what does that lead to? That can lead to liver damage. And now all of a sudden a person needs dialysis. And guess what? They're not eligible for Medicare until they've been on your plan for 33 months. And so what happens? Now they're incurring an expense of $40,000 to $70,000 a month as they're taking dialysis. And so stop and think about that for a second, because it's very similar to the leak that we saw earlier and the impact that it has to homeowners policy. What do you think is going to happen when something like this happens maybe not just once, but it's happening 2 and 3 and 4 times within your health plan, and you don't even know about it? And the reason why you don't know about it, because remember, you transferred the risk to someone else. And so they really don't have to tell you what's going on, because now it's their responsibility to pay those claims, identify that risk, address that risk, and hopefully they're able to keep the claims that are being paid under the premium that you're paying them. But guess what? If it's not, what's going to happen when it's time for renewal? Well, here's what happens. they're basically going to come back to, we're going to talk about an advisor now. I talk to advisors all the time, and one of the funniest things that I hear is that sometimes the carrier will come to the advisor and say, hey, we've had a pretty bad year, and so, but we're going to give you the best increase that we possibly can. So here's the deal. We're going to give you this renewal, and if you promise not to shop it with anyone else, we'll give you the best rate we possibly can. So some advisors take that rate, bring it to their clients, and then the clients accept those rates. Many of the advisors that we work with say, oh, wait a minute. No, we're not accepting that. And we're going to start looking for alternatives. And they might look for a different carrier relationship, or they might say, you know what, I think it's time for a change. And so what does that change look like? Let's talk about that. That's kind of next. So oftentimes what happens next is an advisor might come to you as a company and say, I think we need to consider something else. We need to consider something like level funding or self-funding or something like that. And so what the 5 questions that are often not asked before you go into those discussions that are very important to ask, because if you don't ask these questions, it's going to be a futile effort to try to change what you're doing today to go to a new environment. And oftentimes when these questions are not asked, companies and C-suite are influenced to make a change when they really may not be ready for that change, and they're going to struggle in a new environment, whether it's level funding or self-funding. So what I would encourage you to always think about, whether you're the company or whether you're the advisor speaking to a company, is to find out first, what is your or your company's tolerance for risk? Because there is a risk, it's measurable risk within these alternatives that we'll talk about. And is cash flow a concern for the company? So if this company is really struggling just to make payroll, they're struggling to make the payments on their fully insured plan, then to consider an alternative doesn't make sense, because this is not going to solve for the problem that they're having if they're having a cash flow concern. So, and those 2 things right there, oftentimes if the answer is no to either one of those, then you should probably try to work with them within the current environment. But if the company says, you know what, all of these things are correct, now are they willing to consider alternatives? Because now it opens the door for having discussions about what might be some options to consider. So the other thing also to think about that I've heard before many times, and you don't find this out until you're now in maybe a finalist presentation, is that there might be someone that's in the C-suite that has done self-funding before, and it was a bad experience. But why was it a bad experience? You need to flush those things out, advisors. You need to find out, was there a bad experience because there was a bad administrator? Was a bad experience because of a poor implementation? What was that bad experience, and can it be overcome? And is there a willingness to consider, a first-class administrator like a WellNet to take on that self-funding if that's something they want to consider? One of my favorite things that I hear when we're talking to advisors and to companies just happened yesterday is that when a company is fed up with the increases that they're getting year over year over year, sometimes they'll say, I'm tired of this hamster wheel, get me off of it. Once you have those kinds of signs, now to me, that's a willingness to consider and think about a change. So what do the changes look like? It's really simple. When you're in this, the risk transfer spectrum goes from the left to the right, and healthcare is unique in workman's comp, because now you don't have to be fully insured like you have to be with life, auto, and home. You've got an option now to consider, what might I do differently? So as you move down the spectrum, fully insured, going to level funding, and partially self-funded and self-funded, that's kind of the spectrum. I would encourage employers that if you are really kind of not sure what it looks like, go level funded first. You know what happens in level funding? You now have visibility into what's driving your claims, and you begin to get a taste for what it's like to be self-funded, because you get to see what's happening to your claims. You're paying in a premium once a month, just like you were when you were fully insured. But now you might have the opportunity to, if your plan runs well, to build up a surplus. And then in the level funded plans, generally you're going to be able to get a portion of that surplus back to you after all the claims have been paid. And then the next step is like, you know what? Now I'm ready to go to partially self-funded. And that just simply means that now I want to take on more of the risk, but I also want to make sure that someone's covering me for catastrophic claims for an individual or for the company as a whole. And when that happens, now people call you partially self-funded. And that's what most clients do. Very large companies go fully self-funded. That's when they're so large, they have such a large surplus of money, like a Walmart, they don't have to be partially self-funded. They can self-fund themselves completely, and they're not concerned about the risk or the cost of higher cost claims. So this is a spectrum. And if you've not thought about any of these in that spectrum, I would encourage you, if you're in the C-suite today, that you talk to an advisor and find out what each of these mean. And frankly, if in the next session you want us to dive deeper into things like this, we're happy to do that for you. So now the next thing is really, well, what happens if I go from a fully insured environment into, let's say, a partially self-funded environment? In today's world, if you're fully insured, you pay your premium on a monthly basis, and that premium, that's being paid to one of the national carriers, let's say Blue Cross, United, Cigna, Aetna, Humana, whoever it might be, you pay that premium and you pay that, but remember, you transfer the risk. So when you transfer that risk, they don't have to share with you what they're doing to manage your dollars. For me, that would be a little uncomfortable, but they're going to basically pay the claims, they're going to pay the providers, they're going to take care of the administration of your plan, they're going to answer phone calls, and they're going to give you the basic reporting when they need to. So, but here's what's interesting, is that in that fully insured environment, let's say that you want to implement a wellness plan. You want to do something to start trying to address problems within your plan. The first thing is you probably don't know the very specifics of what's driving the cost of your plan. So it's difficult to identify what you should do. But now if you switch over, and by the way, the last thing I failed to mention is that if you do something that could reduce the cost within your plan, well, you don't benefit from that, but the carrier does. And so that means that now their premium they're collecting from you and the claims that they're having to pay are less. So excess premium, reduced claims, that means higher profits for them. And if there's that surplus that might exist, you don't see it, you don't get a chance to see it. But what will happen, they'll either come to you or come to you through your advisor and say, hey, you've had a good year this year, and so we're going to give you a rate pass. Or they're going to say something like, we're only going to give you a 3 to 5% trend increase. Or we're going to give you a no shop. If you promise not to shop this with anybody else, we're going to give you this level of increase. If you hear that from anyone, as they sometimes say, run for the hills. But what I would consider that you should do, if you hear that, you need to immediately think, wow, my plan's running great. No, you should be thinking, wow, now's the time for me to consider doing something different, because I'm tired of paying in a premium and someone else being able to collect the profits and the surplus that my plan is generating. So what does that look like? If you were to move over into a level funded or a partially self-funded plan, it's important for you to know that it's structured actually the same way a fully insured plan is. Within the fully insured plan, you have really kind of a network access. You have an administrative fee that you're paying. You pay fees for the consultant or the advisor that you work with. And in fact, even fully insured plans have stop loss premium built within them. They just call them different things to protect you if one or more individuals are sick, or if the plan as a whole runs, poorly. And so in a self-funded environment, people sometimes say that there's a risk to go into self-funding. No, there's not. It's a perceived risk. When you go self-funding, you still have all of those protections at the individual and the aggregate level. And in fact, we call those things specific and aggregate protection. And by the way, if you go back over into that fully insured world, a specific they'll sometimes call a pulling point. Same exact thing, no difference. So, but over in the self-funded world, now let's say that you take action. You do something. You listen to your advisor, and the advisor says, I think we should do X because if we do, it's going to reduce the cost of claims. And if it reduces the cost of claims, guess what? You retain those dollars. Those dollars flow right back to your bottom line and to the profitability of your company. Now, the other thing that sometimes happens is people have this tendency to say, well, my maximum cost is the premium that I'm paying in a fully insured basis. So let's say I'm paying $10 million, we'll say $1 million, $1 million a year for my fully insured premium. Well, if I'm looking at self-funding, then I need to make sure that I'm paying less than $1 million. Well, that's not actually true. You want to still take in consideration what's going to happen in both of those environments. So if you're paying $1 million to a fully insured plan or $1 million to self-funding, the likelihood and the opportunity that exists for you in a self-funding platform is much, much greater. Because here's a fact that most plans run at expected claims. And so if you see that bottom bar that covers all those fixed costs, you see the expected claims number, which is what the people that are calculating the stop loss, the actuaries, are thinking what your expected claims might be. If you add all that together, that's where plans most of the time run. In fact, at WellNet, as an example, all of our clients in our block of business runs 4% below expected claims. So what does that mean? The likelihood of you being able to save is the difference between expected claims and the maximum premium that you're paying. In fact, most of the time, maximum is simply taking the expected claims, and because the stop loss carrier is a little afraid of just giving you an expected claims rate, they inflate that by 25%. And when they do that, that padding that they give you as a company is now what reflects a maximum claim number. I'm probably getting a little bit too much into the details now, but what I want you to take away from this is that simply, if I go from a fully insured plan, and I've answered all those 5 questions earlier, and I go into a self-funded plan, now I've got an opportunity to be able to save money. And oh, by the way, also when you go from the left side to the right side, now guess what? You don't have to use the same plan design that every insurance carrier gets approved by the state. You don't have to offer state benefits that are required in a fully insured plan. Oh, and by the way, you can also customize your plan design to really whatever you want to help attract people in your industry for your company. So you have much more flexibility to design that plan. And generally, you're going to save more in a self-funded plan because also you don't have to pay some of the taxes on the premiums that you have to pay in a fully insured environment. Now, if I'm being honest, 1 out of 5 years, you're going to have a bad year. But 4 out of the 5 years, you're going to have good years. And so you have an opportunity to take that surplus, bank it, and be prepared for the rainy day for when you hit one of those 5 years when you might have a bad year. So I want you to think about that. And if you don't feel comfortable with what I just described, ask your advisor to describe more of this to you, or set up a call and let's jump in and talk more about it. So let's see here. I see there were 26 minutes going into the call. So I want just to leave you with this, is that, excuse me, you want to look for now someone who's really kind of building and optimizing smarter self-funded health plans. And there are a lot of companies out there that do this. I would suggest, obviously, that WellNet is the best at this. We're a specialist at managing the health plans. But what I also want you to think about, what's the true risk, the true advantages? On the left-hand side, you can see as a fully insured plan, you've transferred the risk, and we've talked about all of those things that can happen. But on the right-hand side, now when you've began to mitigate that risk, now all of a sudden you've got other opportunities. Things like you can offer guidance before care happens. You can examine the data now to find out what's driving my cost. You know, you can actually have people call in and speak to an advocate and they can help to offer alternatives to care. And now instead of premiums going up, you now can see your costs stabilize. And instead of payroll changes having to take place or increasing deductibles or out of pockets or copays, now you can begin to think about how can I enhance my plan and how can I increase benefits and add incentives. And the other thing is now, equipped with information, you can begin to renew each year with a strategy of how you're going to address the cost in future years. So the last thing I'll leave you with is, folks, we got to do something. We got to do something different than we're doing today, because here's a fact of where healthcare is going. And in 2023, this is where we saw healthcare at $24,000. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not going to change unless we're willing to change, think differently, and act differently. So with that, I'll leave that thought with you. And oh, by the way, for future sessions and for those that might be interested in the deck that we've talked about today, we're going to include other information for you just about healthcare and what's happening, what's driving healthcare, how it's evolved, and anything else that you think might be helpful to you. So, Megan, going back to you, can we just kind of see what kind of questions came in and what we need to answer?
Yes, Dave, thank you. Okay, we have a couple of questions. The first one we'll address: does WellNet use your own Ben admin software, or do you use what the client is using?
Excellent question. Thanks, Megan. So we do not have our own Ben admin. As when you think about Ben admin platforms, Ben admin platforms, for those of you who may not be aware, typically are going to enroll all of the benefits that exist within an employer. And that means not only the medical plan, but the dental plan, the vision plan, the life, cancer plan, all of those types of ancillary coverages too. That's what a true Ben admin system does. So we work with a ton of different companies that do Ben admin or benefit administration for companies. And we've already built the integrations and have all of that in place so that we can then transfer that eligibility data from that Ben admin system directly to us. Now, since you use Ben admin, that's what we can do. And if you're just an employer, a smaller employer, you don't have a Ben admin system, and you would like to just be able to go into a portal to be able to load new employees, terminate employees, make changes to their medical and pharmacy plan and dental plan and vision plan that you might have with WellNet, we do have a portal that you can do that. It's just not a full-blown Ben admin system to be able to manage every aspect of your benefit plan. So hope that answers the question.
Excellent,
Others?
Dave. Yeah, we can do one more question before we give everyone the rest of their day back.
Okay.
This one's interesting. How often do you come across a company who has a limited understanding of healthcare financing? And if so, why do you think this is?
Can you read that one more time? That really was a good question. I want to make sure.
Yes, okay. How often do you come across a company who has a limited understanding of healthcare financing?
So the truth of the matter is probably it happens more often than you would think. And maybe it's because of who we're speaking to. Or it might just be lack of experience, because so many companies remain fully insured. And when they remain fully insured, what they're simply doing is just paying a premium every month. And so they oftentimes are not aware that the protection vehicles and the risk mitigation vehicles that are in place within a self-funded plan or partially self-funded plan are very similar. The difference is that you might finance that healthcare differently, which just means you might cut 3 checks instead of 1. And then sometimes there's ways to be able to protect your assets and to put things in trust, as an example. And people are not very familiar with those kinds of advanced strategies. That's all the more reason why I believe that companies who are not comfortable or familiar with different and alternative financing strategies should ask those questions of their advisor. And certainly, if the advisor wants to get on a call with people at WellNet, we're happy to do that too.
Excellent, Dave. We are right at time. what an incredible succinct session. In 30 minutes, you really tackled a lot of great questions. And we did have folks ask when the next topics will be revealed. We will send out a survey. We want all the first attendees of this session to give their feedback. And then in the next couple of days, we'll be releasing the next few topics for all of you in this Power Half Hour series.
That sounds great. Well, everyone, thank you so much for attending today. I hope you got something out of this. We are excited about the opportunity just to be able to continue to have these sessions and educate and elevate the conversation so that all of you are making informed decisions. Thank you for your time today, and we look forward to the next time we're together. Thank you.